Hi, everyone. My name is Abdia Lewis, and today I'll be presenting on negotiation preparation. We've definitely done a lot of preparation for in-class negotiations, that one-page prep form that we usually fill out before class, but we've generally done that from an inherently distributive angle, especially with the negotiations that we had at the beginning of the semester. And all that means is we've been focused on several single issue negotiations. We've had back and forth exchanges of offers. We focused on the other party's BATNA and the zone of possible agreements. We've talked about several ways to approach negotiations, and I was interested in other approaches and how a negotiator might prepare for that. Ron Fells, a dean at the University of Western Australia's Business School, whose international relations experience gave rise to his interest in negotiation and mediation, he wrote an article on the two broad approaches to preparing for negotiation. First, from a distributive negotiation angle, which we've done a lot in class, and second, from a principal negotiation angle. So I decided to dive into the preparation from a principal negotiation perspective, which was first explained in a very popular negotiations book, Getting to Yes, which I'll talk about in just a bit. Data collection from 28 negotiation simulations conducted by Ray Fells found that although negotiators tend to give close consideration to what they might achieve, they tend not to give consideration to how they might achieve it. That highly recognized book that I mentioned earlier, Getting to Yes, Negotiating Agreement Without Giving In by Roger Fisher and William Ury of Harvard Negotiation Project, approaches negotiation from a principal angle, a more integrative method, so to speak. Principal negotiation is an interest-based approach to negotiation that focuses primarily on conflict management and conflict resolution. It uses an integrative approach to find a mutually shared outcome in an efficient and amicable way. The authors of Getting to Yes broke down the approach in 4 different categories. The first, separating the people that you're negotiating with from the problems that they have. Second, focusing on the interest and not the position. Third, inventing options for mutual gain. And 4, use of objective criteria. So let's get into it. The first prescription for the principal negotiation is separating the people from the problem. As negotiators, we become inherently personally involved with the issues that we focus on. When there's resistance to the position that we've made during negotiations, we tend to feel personally attacked. Separating yourself and your ego from the issues allows you to address the problem without damaging relationships. It also allows you to get a clearer view of the substance of the conflict, which is important. So how can you prepare to separate the person from the problem? It's honestly really about your mindset. Before you're sitting at the negotiation table, put yourself in the other party's shoes. Try to understand where they're coming from. Remember that it's not the person, it's the problem that you're trying to tackle. Don't blame or attack the other party for the problem. Prepare to come with that in mind and keep that in your mind during the negotiation. Think of the other party as a partner rather than an adversary. Thinking of someone as an adversary can psychologically put you in fight mode. Be prepared to listen and allow the other side to express their emotion, because you obviously would want that for yourself as well. Think about whether you would like to make a symbolic gesture, such as an apology or expression of sympathy. This can help diffuse strong emotions. And again, it's all about mindset when you walk in. If you put yourself in the other party's shoes, view them as a partner and not an adversary, come in willing to listen, and plan to make symbolic gestures if need be, separating the individual sitting across the table from you from their issues becomes a lot easier. Dealing with a substantive problem and maintaining a good working relationship does not need to be a conflict of goals if the parties are committed and psychologically prepared to treat each separately on its own legitimate merits. The next prescription is focus on the underlying interests, not the stated positions. You know what interest means, but let's look at the definition. A fundamental need or requirement that drives the negotiator's behavior. In negotiations, there are usually multiple shared, compatible, and conflicting interests. Identifying shared and compatible interests gets both parties to the point of agreement. Think relationship building. Think a more balanced solution to the issue at hand. Think win-win. So how can you prepare to identify the other party's interests? Well, prepare to ask questions. So questions to think about when you're trying to step in the other party's shoes. Think to yourself, why is the other party negotiating with me? What brought them to the negotiating table in the first place? What do I have that they need? How important is each interest to them? This is also a great exercise for separating the person from the problem. Also, be prepared to ask them questions. What are your motivations for being at the negotiating table with me? What are you trying to accomplish? How can we accomplish this? Why do you hold that specific position? Write these questions down in advance and even bring them with you to the negotiation so you remember to ask them. Also, ask yourself questions before the negotiation. What are your interests? How would you rank them by importance? What story are you trying to convey to the other side? What do you want them to know? What don't you want them to know? Write these questions down as well. Think about it. Why do people use planners and diaries? There's a certain power in writing down the things you'd like to accomplish and clarity gained through the process of being specific about your interests. Practice communicating your goals clearly and be specific. You want to make sure that the other side understands your point of view and it allows your interest to be understood as more credible. When you're thinking about these questions ahead of time, thinking about the other side's interests, about your interests and your whys, and writing them down, at the negotiating table, you'll be able to get a good sense of why the other party is there and explain what you want them to know and why in a better way. The third is generating options for mutual gain. Fish and Rye identified 4 obstacles to generating creative problem-solving options. Deciding prematurely on an option and failing to consider alternatives, being too intent on narrowing options to find the single answer, defining the problem in win-lose terms, or thinking that it's up to the other side to come up with a solution to the party's problem. So how do you prepare to tackle these obstacles? If you have a good idea of what the other party's interests are, brainstorm beforehand possible solutions to the problem. Negotiators devote a lot of time to brainstorming a range of possible options before selecting the best one for the parties involved. Come to the table with an idea of possible solutions to get the process going in the right direction. Also, it's helpful to identify the decision makers beforehand if you can, and target proposals directly towards them when it's time to negotiate. For example, imagine a situation where you're in a job negotiation. Your interests are you want an increased salary. The employer sent you an email of who you'll be interviewing with, or you do your own research to find out who the decision makers are. You also may already have a sense of what that job maker, the job seeker wants, to have someone devoted to the work. So a possible solution may be to take less vacation days in return for a higher salary. Coming up with solutions before sitting at the negotiating table gets the ball rolling. And the last prescription is insisting on objective criteria for measuring outcomes. Where interests are not aligned and where they are directly opposing, objective criteria should be used to come up with resolutions. Remember, you want to maintain the relationship you build with the other party. Once opposition is realized, a battle of egos can spark, each party wanting their own interest to be agreed upon. So how do you develop objective criteria in advance, and how do you use them in a negotiation? To answer the former question, it depends on the issue. So let's say, for example, you're selling a car, similar to the Batmobile negotiation we did at the beginning of the semester. Some objective standards may include the Blue Book value of the car, what the car has consistently been sold for, and what the court might award as the value of the car. Objective criteria that needs to be used has to be independent of each side's will and should apply, at least in theory, to both sides. Negotiation is a process of continuously creating alternatives. To prepare, it's necessary to brainstorm various options that may be encountered in the negotiation. To avoid issues, come to the table with understanding of the objective criteria you want to use. That is, solutions based on scientific findings, professional standards, legal precedents, tradition. You get the gist. So let's briefly recap. People. The person and the problem are not the same thing. Come to the negotiating table with that in mind. Interest. Write down questions to obtain the interest of the other party, and also write down your own interests and goals and why you have them. Options. Think about the various solutions to the problems before you sit down with the other party to get the ball rolling. Criteria. Prepare for possibility of deadlock. Think about objective solutions beforehand that are available to you. Preparation is important in negotiations, and this is just one angle of approaching preparation from a principal negotiating perspective. Thank you.